high-level things that stick out. We were talking about stelliums. You have a stellium in Capricorn. So you have your Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter there. And then in most of the other houses, in signs, you have one or two placements. So main area of concentration is your fourth house, Capricorn. Fourth house is about family. It's about your foundations, your ancestry, your inner world. It's kind of the things that are making you who you are, very formative experiences. And having them in Capricorn. Capricorn is about tradition, some hierarchy. Capricorn is associated with ambition. It's like personal ambition. It's like trying to go up the ladder because it's about this idea of the hierarchy. So when you're pairing it with the fourth house, it's looking at the family tree, the structure of that family tree really, really being emphasized, and potentially in understanding your place within that tree and your growth journey within it. But you have the Sun there, you have Saturn, and you have Jupiter there. And they all look like they're all direct. Let me see if you have any retrograde. Pluto, Uranus, Mars, retrogrades. You have 3 retrograde planets. So these 3 are all in direct motion. None of them are close enough to be conjoined, but they are what's called co-present. So they are all existing within the same house and sign, but they're not close enough to be like fusing with each other in a conjunction and having their energies like really link up. They're all kind of just outside of it or well out of range, but they all are existing within those 30 degrees of Capricorn. So other things that stand out to me. So we were just talking about transits for today. I think this will be interesting to talk about. So we have Venus that is at the 29th degree of Pisces. So let me see the exact time of when it is changing signs. It might be this evening. So let's confirm. Okay. So for me, it's happening overnight in my time zone. So it's happening at like 1 a.m. So technically it's happening tomorrow, not today, but depending on your time zone, it may be happening today, the 30th. So Venus entering Aries. So for me, it's happening at 1:16 a.m. tomorrow. For you, it may be happening late this evening. So for this transit, Venus has been in retrograde. It entered its pre-shadow period at the very, very end of January, stationed retrograde on March 1st, ended its retrograde on, I think, the 12th, a couple weeks ago. So now it's in its post-shadow period, which means it's retracing ground that it already went through. So it's stationed retrograde in Aries. So it got to a certain degree, either 9 or 10 degrees of Aries, then started backing up. So within the next 13 hours, it will be entering Aries. So it will still have 9 or 10 degrees before it gets out of the shadow period. That doesn't happen until I think the 15th or 16th of May. So we still have another couple weeks before it clears. So you can think about this as this change is happening. It is now in direct motion. It's still retreading some ground that it was working through since January, the beginning of this year. So for you, Sherry, you have Pisces and Aries in the 6th and 7th houses. So that means Venus, for the majority of the retrograde, has been in Pisces. And then now it's returning to Aries. So what will be happening starting 13 hours from now is in direct motion, Venus, which doesn't like to be in Aries. So it's not particularly jazzed and super functional as it is in Pisces. It much prefers to be in Pisces. However, it is bringing into the 7th house area of your life, which is committed partnerships. So this can be romantic partnerships, this can be business partnerships, anything with like a contract, something that's built to be for the long haul. Not talking about family though. These are more of like a one-on-one type of arrangement. Bringing peace, focus on your relationships into a relationship realm. Where's the balance? Where's the harmony? So it brings up a lot of questions, and oftentimes for Venus retrogrades, regardless of which sign and which house they are in, there's an assessment of what your relationships are doing. So for you, there's already this relationship assessment that's going on anyway, but you were having it in your sixth house, which I mentioned earlier, is focusing on your job, focusing on your health. So do you have balance in your work life, in how you're taking care of yourself, in relationship with pets, if you have any? And then it's dipping into these committed partnerships. So this Venus is going to be in moving through Aries for quite some time now before it finally gets out and goes into a different energy in Taurus. But things to reflect on, so you can reflect back, going all the way back to, I think it was January 26th or 28th. We have been in this energy between these two houses for such a long period of time, and those would be the areas of life that you could reflect on or just be mindful of, because as I mentioned, Venus will be working through, slightly unhappily, working through Aries for a bit now. With the retrograde and now without the retrograde, there's a focus on what's going on in your relationships that are long term. Where's the balance in them? Are your values being reflected in these relationships? So lots of things to think about, and expect some stuff to pop up in that area. That makes sense. I'm married 44 years. Our relationship is in a shift now for the better. Great, exactly. So just because we have this Venus retrograde where we are reevaluating our relationships, it doesn't mean that we are breaking up, even though there is a connotation with that. There's divorces and breakups that happen in Venus retrogrades, but we're on, quote unquote, on the other side of that. It's just it's a shifting of the energies. It's a reassessment. It's like, do we need to recalibrate? And sometimes the recalibration is just breaking up. And other times it's like, okay, so how have I changed? How have you changed? How can we work together to create balance? So if you have been experiencing that for the bulk of this year, then that's the Venus retrograde. And now it's going to be continuing to move through this seventh house area. So all of the work that you have been doing with your relationship in your marriage, continuing to be tended to, going through all of May and the very beginning of June. Stephanie, this is saying that you are a Leo. It says Sun is in Leo at the 29th degree, not Virgo. Let me just confirm I have this date. Let me rattle it off for you. You are at the 29th and change degree. You are like minutes, as in the Sun probably entered Virgo, like, as you know, short as like within an hour or something, like pretty close. So I think this is a great opportunity to talk about another common question that people have, is about this idea of being a cusp. It is not a philosophy that I personally subscribe to, and I know a lot of astrologers these days increasingly are not subscribing to this notion. From the traditional astrology lens, where it is where it is, you know? So just because you are close, well, okay, but the Sun was still in Leo, so it means Leo. And because we all have every energy, you have placements, you have Mars, which is, I think, what's in the trine here, because that's at 0 degrees. So I think the trine is, it just looked like it because it looks like it's sitting in Virgo. And then I looked at the top and I went, hold on, that says 29 of Leo. So your grand Earth trine is Mars, Jupiter, Neptune. Very, very interesting. So it doesn't mean like just because you were born close that like, oh, you're picking up some other energy. It's like, well, you do have Virgo placements. So it would be a different story if you identified with some Virgo traits, but you had nothing in there and your Sun was in Leo. as an example, you have Mercury, which is one of Virgo, it's Virgo and Gemini's ruler. You have that in Virgo. So that is saying your mind, how you think, how you speak, how you communicate is picking up on Virgo. Mars is there as part of this grand Earth trine. It's about your drives, what motivates you. So these are really powerful personal planets that are relating to Virgo. So it makes sense that you connect with Virgo energy, as all of us should. Whenever we have planets, especially the personal planets and the luminaries that are in these certain signs, it makes sense that you would connect to it because it's indicating part of who you are as an individual. So I think what you'd want to parse out here is what does the Virgo energy mean for those personal planets versus what does the Leo sun mean? Because the sun carries its own energy. And so creating a differentiation between that. So if it's your mind, your motivation, your drive, what things that you're passionate about that you want to follow, pursue, that's fourth house Virgo. That's your family, your foundations, things we've been talking about before, creating order within the home, within your family, effective communication. Maybe you're a mediator in your family, kind of a point person, perfectionism stemming from your childhood. Lots of different ways to interpret that. And then your moon, your moon and your sun are both in Leo. So these are very, very, and then you also have Venus in there as well. So literally all of the personal planets and the luminaries are in these two signs. So of course you would identify with both of them because this is the base of your quote unquote personality in your chart is in these two signs right here in the third and fourth house. So when you're looking at your Leo sun, that's in the third house, about communication. So there is a heavy through line here of communication being very, very important within your chart, how you were talking to people, how you were connecting with other people in your close circle, so in your neighborhood, within your family, siblings, like that, in that closer knit network. But yeah, the sun and the moon just have a different journey. And I didn't mention before, oh, perfect. And you have a Gemini ascendant, and so then that's ruled by Mercury. So there's a lot of talking in this chart. There's an emphasis on communicating with people, in learning and sharing information, and also taking up space. When you have Leo in this third house, it's like, and your sun is there and your moon is there. It's how are you taking center stage? How are you sharing yourself? How are you engaging also in creativity as well? And having your emotional safety coming from that self-expression. And the expression can be through voice, through words, through actions that align with your words, through maybe teaching, writing, any form of communication. And it can also be through different creative endeavors, hobbies, things like that. I'm very glad that we identified this. So, so you're walking around and you know you're our Leo. Communication has always been highlighted in my life within all my relationships. 100%. That is a big standout here. Having um, having one your ascendant in Gemini, but having Mercury in Venus, it just all of these personal planets right here at the bottom of the chart in the third house, and then in Virgo, and then in Gemini, it's like it's all about talking, it's about expression, it's about creativity. How do we get along? Um, how do we relate? How do we share? All of the above. And just making sure that there's an alignment there. So because you have all of these personal planets and luminaries in these same two spaces, it's like they want to work in tandem. They want to work with each other. So there's a lot of alignment with your motivations versus what grounds you, what makes you feel safe versus what makes you feel alive. It's like they're all in the same areas in these two areas of life as relates to communication, as relates to family, self-expression, perfectionism, creating order. It's like they're all packed in to each other and intersecting. But yeah, you have your sun and Venus are basically exactly on top of each other, exact conjunction. They're 1 minute off. 2931, 2932. So those are really, that's very, very potent placement at that 29th degree of Leo. And then you have at 0 degrees, 0 degrees of Virgo is Mars. So they're all right on top of each other. So that's what I mean, like they're fused. So you would make the argument that your Mars and your Sun are conjunct, even though they're in different signs. And it's because they're less than a degree apart. They're just sitting on the edge there. So you have, and then 2 degrees of Mercury, they're all next to each other. They're all within the orb of 5, all of these planets. Moon's a little bit farther out. Moon's at 15. It's not getting picked up. But these 4 are like all on top of each other, right on that borderline. So yeah, we must have been at a point in time where all of these planets, so Venus was preparing to change signs as it is doing today. So it is preparing to change signs just as the Sun was preparing to change signs, and they were going to both together enter Virgo. It's based on your sun sign, what your sign is. So normally when people ask, what's your sign? Or they say, what's your star sign? What's your zodiac sign? People will say their sun sign. And that's because of pop astrology. For anyone who studies astrology like myself, who dives into it more, we understand that we are not just our sun sign. That, yeah, as we've been talking about today, there's so many different placements. Like I mentioned, personal planets. These are the planets that are closest to the sun, that are representing really fundamental parts of your personality, versus the outer planets are talking about like different external factors and dynamics. So there's a separation between the quality of each of the planets. Like, what do they represent for you? So that's why you'll hear people say big 6. So they'll say, what's your sun sign? That's your sign. What is your big 3? That's sun, moon, rising. And then now some people say, what's your big 6? So that's sun, moon, rising, plus those 3 personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars. The group of 6 for the big 6 gives you a better profile of what the person is like. Now, it's totally missing where they are in the chart. It matters what sign they're in, what house they're in. Are they aspecting each other? Like in this example in Stephanie's chart where I was saying 4 of the 6 personal planets, or placements, if you will, are right on top of each other. That's important. And I don't have that. Other people don't have that. But for Stephanie, this is important to know that those are all right next to each other, like within a degree or 2 of each other. Because that tells you something about how they're working with each other to shape who Stephanie is as a person. So yeah, so if someone says, what's your sign? They're going to be saying, they're referring to your sun sign. Now, people that know something about astrology are going to say, hey, what's your big 3? Or do you know what your big 6 is? Or do you know what your rising sign is? Another term for rising sign is ascendant. So if you hear ascendant, that's what people are talking about. For me, I am always most interested in what's going on with people's rising and their moon. And that's because for me, my moon, having my moon, it's like that's my chart ruler, which so it rules my ascendant. So I have a vested interest in what's going on with the moon. I think it's a really interesting and important window into someone. And their rising sign is so significant and often gets overlooked. People don't think about what a rising sign is, and I feel not that it's more important, but I want to give it the light of day that it deserves because most people just talk about the sun sign. And I felt like something switched in my brain and I understood astrology in a different way when I wasn't just thinking of myself as an Aries sun. When I understood this is what my moon is. Oh my gosh, that makes sense. That's filling in these gaps that I didn't relate to with the sun sign. What's my rising sign? Oh my gosh, even more. I love this. So it feels like it's more of a accurate picture of you when you pull in these different elements. And if you're someone who happens to have your big three or most of your big six in a single sign, there's different ways that that energy can be displayed, but it just means it's so reinforced. It's probably really obvious, like it when you're interacting with people, that that energy is so strong for you. But for me, like I have had people telling me, like when they try to guess, when people try to guess what my sign is, they're trying to guess my sun sign. And I just had someone tell me the other day that they thought I was an air sign. And I started laughing because it's like, I have no air in my chart, nothing. So that tells you that I'm coming across in a certain way that makes what's ruling the air signs, predominantly, we have Mercury, as being very strong and dominant. And so you would say, okay, well, where's Mercury in my chart? Like, what's coming across that makes me seem like I'm an air sign? And it's because I actually have heavy water in my chart and heavy earth in my chart. So this is where, like, if we're just looking at people and saying, like, oh, you seem like you're a Capricorn. Oh, I don't really know about earth signs. I don't get along with earth signs. It's like we're just boxing people in so much. And that, the person who's looking at me saying, oh, you seem like you're an air sign. It's like, that is incorrect. But it tells you that there's something about the energy that I give off, how I carry myself, which is woven into all of these different areas, elements, and signs within the chart that is either just landing incorrectly, because it is incorrect, or that it's borrowing because it's more nuanced. It's more nuanced than just, I like air signs, I don't like air signs. It's about where the planets are mattering, the sign that they're in, the house that they're in, how they're in relation to each other matters. And that's why every single person can be their own unique little snowflake, because you could have twins. You could have twins that are born a few minutes apart, and they could have basically the same chart, or they could be a few minutes apart and their ascendant is different. The moon sign is different. That can happen. But let's say they have exactly the same chart. They're still going to be different people. And that's because there's high and low vibration for each of the placements. And you can engage with them in a different way. You can choose to engage with your birth chart and say, all right, well, this is telling me that if I want to regulate my emotional state, I could do things like this. And maybe one of those twins chooses to do those tips and the other one does not. They're going to be coming across as very different. I love this kind of information. It's interesting. I'm so glad. I'm definitely glad I recorded today's class. My intuition on it was correct. I was like, I don't know why I'm recording this class, and now I know.